Hi everyone, welcome to today's live stream. I'm super excited to have you all join us today. Hi Sage, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here today. Let's get into it.
Yeah, this is our last live stream for 2024. So I'm very excited that we get to do this before the year, runs out. So Sage, before we dive into all the serious stuff, what's been the highlight of your week so far?
Yeah, the highlights of my week. Yeah, so I think I've been working mostly on Panda CSS this week.
Okay.
So largely trying to like get token analysis so you can track the usage of design tokens in your project. Yeah, that's something I've been working on this week. It's been a major highlight, and yeah, I mean maybe playing games, video games too.
Yeah, sounds interesting. I've been playing video games. I think this week I've just been using it to decompress and just relax and get into a good vibe for the holidays. So, yeah, I've been playing lots of video games as well. All right. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Esther and I work as a developer advocate at Chakra UI. And with me, I have Sage. Think, Sage, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, this guy needs no introduction, but I'll do it.
Right.
Yeah, my name is Shagun Adebayo. You can call me Sage. I'm the creator of Chakra UI, Panda CSS, ZagJS, and a couple of other open source projects. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So today we're going to be diving into something very exciting that I'm sure a lot of us are curious about, migrating from Chakra UI V2 to V3. It's a really huge move and some of you may be feeling a bit unsure, uncertain and hesitant because migrating from V2 to V3 is a breaking change. So Sage is going to be walking us through everything we need to know in terms of migration and just the best practices for having a smooth migration. But before we dive in, I want to hear from all of you in the chat. I know we have about 7 people right now watching and listening. So, have you started migrating to V3 and or what has been the major challenge if you've had any when migrating? We'd like to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll answer them along as we go. So let's talk about some of the major updates in V3 Sage. What do developers need to know before migrating, like when starting on migration? What do they need to be aware about?
Yeah, I think the major thing is the fact that V3 is like a whole design system change in that sense. What that means is like the colors, the way the components look, is somewhat like upgraded from V2. So we tried to sort of like retheme or restyle most of the components to look pretty modern, a lot more better than V2, a lot more consistent. And that's largely because we use design tokens in Chakra V3, right? So we kind of try to leverage design tokens to keep everything consistent, and the theming system, the theming engine also is a major thing in V3. To add to that, I think it also be the fact that we use RQI in Chakra. So we try to step away from trying to write like React specific code every time when we need to create a component. So what we do is like we created like a headless library, which is called RQI, and then Chakra is built on top of that headless library, which kind of helps us to like, I mean, have some sort of flexibility in terms of supporting other, possibly supporting other frameworks like SolidJS or Vue in the future.
Yeah, I think right off the bat, the design system is what's very obvious. For example, if you're using V2 and then you're using a similar components in V3, you can see that the design system and the colors, I say the border radius and the box shadow, things like that are immediately visible. But some of the, I say, not so obvious differences, I would say, are the packages. I know in V2 we had a good number of packages that you need to install in Chakra UI before using it. But right now we no longer use framer motion and emotion styled. So is there some, do you want to speak about that? Like why did we drop these 2 packages in V3?
Yeah, I think a major theme of V3 is just like trying to reduce the runtime JavaScript that's involved in using Chakra UI, right? So,
Okay.
Frame Motion, for example, is good, helps you to animate things using JavaScript, which is great. But on the flip side, we already have most of this in the platform itself. So, in my mind, I would say like Frame Motion is great for like, I mean, if you have like a website and you need to do things that's like pretty smooth and like animate things, it's a pretty good use of that. But within a component library, I think CSS is largely enough to animate things. I mean, a dialogue that opens and closes, a menu that opens and closes. I think Frame Motion was a bit of an overkill, reflecting back on V2. Yeah. And
Okay.
emotion styled is somewhat slightly different. So the reason we had emotion styled in V2 was, I think with V2 we had quite like a double pass of style interpolation. So what happened is like when you pass styles to your component, Chakra will evaluate that, pass that onto emotion styled, which will then pass that onto emotion react. Right. So what you try to do is pretty much just like cut that process to be as simple as possible. All right, so we kind of try to like, and now what we do is we just go from when you pass our props, we pass that on straight up to emotion react. All right, so it's somewhat like a smoother process, and that
Process, yeah.
improves the performance significantly, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Andrew. It says great work on what I've seen so far in V3, ArcZag, and Panda. Looking forward to using. Yeah, Andrew, you should definitely check out Chakra AI V3. It's amazing. So another major update is using the create system method instead of extend theme when creating custom themes. So can you also speak about that? Is it just the name change that is different, or behind the scenes, are there other things that you incorporated into this create system method that makes it different from extend theme used in V2?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in V2 we had this extend theme idea. So what happens is it's pretty much just a function that measures all the things you pass, right? So if you have the default theme in Chakra and you extend it with your own colors and fonts, we just do like a deep merge of those two things together, and then we create a system under the hood in V2. So this is V2 now. All right. So in V3 what we did was we wanted to significantly improve the performance of from V2. So one of
Okay.
the ways to improve the performance is to take the creation of that system outside of the React lifecycle. So you can do things like, I mean, caching values, so that you don't like recalculate the same value twice. All right. So what happened in V2 is sometimes, it's not every time, but sometimes if you've got a box with a PT of 2, and you maybe just change only one property there, or you use a different value, or you re-render the same component twice, there's a very good chance that there might be some recomputation along there. We tried to do some caching in V2, but it wasn't like thoroughly designed. So what we did in V3 was to like take all of the style computation outside of the React lifecycle, and we can definitely just like memorize certain values. So if you pass P2 and then you re-render the component multiple times, you don't get any computation. It only happens once, and subsequently it just returns the same value. So that's like very useful to speed things up in terms of that style computation. In
Okay.
that, yeah.
So are you saying that the performance in V3 is a lot better than the performance in V2 based on what
Yes,
you said?
indeed it
Okay.
is. Yeah, so we definitely did a test, a render test reading the React profiler, and then we definitely saw that the render and re-render, the reconciliation time specifically, was way faster, at least twice as fast,
Mm.
2 times faster in V3 than V2.
And
The
V2.
other thing I was going to mention is the fact that like this new system that we've got in Chakra V3 allows us to swap the underlying styling engine, right? So we rely on emotion right now, but we're not
Okay.
tied to emotion as we were in V2, right? So you could swap that out potentially with styled components.
Oh,
Or
interesting.
Now that React 19 is a thing, you could swap that out with like, there's this new styling library called Restyle that does something pretty cool with React 19 and removes all the runtime style injection. So you could definitely just like take our emotion and swap it out with Restyle. and you get the same benefits, but this time with React 19 performance boost in that sense.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. So Andrew says, do you foresee any issues if we were to continue with Chakra V2 for a short time, but start bring let me read that again. Do you foresee any issues if we were to continue with Chakra V2 for a short time, but start bring to use components from Arc and style them using the Chakra factory function? So I guess what he's trying to say is they continue with V2, but
Yeah.
then they use components from Arc and use the
Okay.
Chakra factory to style them.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if you still want to use V2, V2 is still there. I mean, it's not like thrown away, and it's not. It still works pretty well. So feel
Okay.
free to compose. I mean, RQI is completely headless, so it doesn't really care about your styling library. So you could potentially merge RQI and Chakra V2, and definitely work.
Okay, but are there any like downsides to using if someone just wants to, if a developer just wants to stick with V2 and are there any downsides to using V2?
I don't see any downsides, to be honest. Besides the fact that like you're doing work that already exists in V3. That's like the only downside I see. But I think as far as the component and everything working and the styling working correctly, I don't see any downsides.
And finally, in V3, I think one of the biggest updates in V3 is the introduction of snippets. So snippets came in V3 prior. In V2, there were no snippets. You had to literally install the Chakra UI React package and get all the components. But in V3 now we have snippets. So I think one recurring question that we always get is, what's the point of having snippets? Like, what's the point of snippets? And what happens if snippets are updated? How does it still stay updated in locally in my file, in my app? How do we sync updating snippets and still having it locally?
Yeah, so I'll just tell a quick story. So when we got towards the end of V3, one of the core principles we try to follow in V3 is like we want to keep the core all the components open by default, which means in V2, for example, a checkbox component, you just write a checkbox and that's it. But that's not open, right? So what we did was like everything is going to be open by default. What that means, you're going to have to like write the checkbox root, checkbox input, checkbox label, and then the lines of code start to grow significantly. So when we got to the end of that process, we thought that like, I mean, this would be quite a lot of code to write to get the same checkbox you had in V2. So one of the things that we thought about is okay, how can we sort of do this in a way that like you own that in your project, so you can have the same like short and the closed checkbox, but the composition of that, pretty much take all that verbose code and shorten that and put it in your project, so you can actually like update that and tweak that, right? So the reason I like to use a checkbox is because it's very simple and it's quite complex. You could go like, how do I change the border radius of that check thing that looks like a square? Or how do I change the icon inside the check? Or how do I animate those icons, right? So you could do like, you could want to do quite a number of things that if we close that up within Chakra UI, then we have to expose props for you to kind of like tweak or change
Like,
certain components, right? So the best way the best way we could think about in general is to figure out how can we take our open by default components and then compose them in your project, so you can have like a checkbox.tsx file sitting somewhere in your project that gives you the same like power like V2, but uses V3 in that sense. So we wanted to use snippets as a way to sort of like shorten your code for you automatically, so you don't have to write too many things. But again, you can totally do without snippets and build everything yourself if you're fine with sort of like writing that number of codes to actually get it working.
okay, so snippets more or less make your development process more flexible because you're giving developers the code that they need and also the flexibility to make changes to that code to suit like whatever use case or whatever thing that they're building, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the easiest way is think of it like a super short version of the same component. So imagine if you're building a date picker, for example. There's so many things in a date picker. You don't want to be literally be writing every single node that exists in a date picker. You just want to write date picker and then that's it, right? But in Chakra, since it's open by default, it can be quite stressful to write that line, that number of lines of code. I'll show you an example when we start. But I think the main goal of snippets is how can we just like streamline and shorten this for you and put that in your project, of course, so you can always be in control of how these components are closed off.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Sage, enough of the talking. Let's dive into actually migrating an app right now that has, Chakra UI V2 to make you use Chakra UI V3. So, what app are we going to be migrating? Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, let me think about it up. So let's do like my website. I mean, we could do my website, we could do your website, but let me just use mine
Okay.
since
Your
I know what's
website.
in there.
Okay.
So I'll use my website as an example. It's built with, I think, V2. So you will try to
Okay.
migrate that over to V3 in, let's just say like 30 minutes, see how far we can go.
Okay. Your time starts now.
And we call it a day. Okay, so I'll just add my screen to stage, zoom in significantly, and just go to my current website. So this is the current site that I've got. It's an XJS site. I manage some of the content with content layer, and it's got like this is all V2. So we're gonna try to take this over to V3 and see like I mean the things we have to do to make it all work.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll switch over to VS Code. This is the code, V2 code. Check the package JSON. And you can see that, I mean, it's definitely running on V2 and it has all the things installed. So one of the first things you want to do, of course, when you're migrating is to change the version or upgrade the version. But before I do that, it's also running on like a pretty like low version of Next.js. So let me
We're
start by
starting. Okay.
kind of like bumping all those things up first. So what I'll do here is I'm just gonna upgrade. I think I can do NCU. NCU is just a version update CLI. So I'm just gonna do NCU filter next. So we just kind of like, I mean, bump up the Next.js and all the other Next related packages. And then, as always, we can get rid of frame and motion since we no longer need that. So that's just a dependency check. And I've got content layer here. I think I just bumped that up to the latest version now. Yeah, so with that in place, let's just install the dependencies.
Okay.
I also know I don't need emotion styled in that sense anymore.
Yeah.
So that's removed now in V3. You just need emotion react and chakra react. So let's just update that quickly. And then we just run the def command to be sure that things are going pretty well. Content layer, next content layer. I'm just gonna check that one as well. The version of this guy looks good. So I'm trying to upgrade the baseline. I mean, before getting into Chakra, at least
Yeah.
see that everything works.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got something going on. I'm just gonna open that up. Yeah,
Okay.
so we can see it renders pretty well. So Next.js and all the things are at least up to date, which is good. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we can now it's about time to start the chakra migration now.
Yeah.
So what I'll do, I just kind of like bump this up to V3. So let's queue this one first and then bump this to V3. Probably bump the CLI as well. Probably share the same version. Let's install that. Maybe I do the same for emotion React. Not sure. Um, so that's the first thing is, of course, just sort out your dependencies, and then you can start getting into the code. Okay, so once that is done, uh, we can, follow the Chakra UI guide.
Yeah, let me just put it out. The migration guide.
Yeah, so just open the docs. We getting started docs for Next.js. I can add some snippets. I can add some basic snippets to get started. Again, you don't have to, but I just find it more convenient to just add the snippets. So once that's done, I should get new components sitting in my project.
Yep.
So I have some basic components. I don't have to use them all. At the end of this migration, I might just remove the things I don't use. So with that said, I'll just go to the root of my application and start from there, starting with app, right?
Yeah.
So app is pretty much the root of the application. So we've got like ChakraProvider here. We've got a theme here. Let's see what's going on in the theme. So the theme is like, you can see pretty much like it's a custom theme.
Mm-hmm.
And it's using extend theme from Chakra UI. So what I'm gonna do here is I have to resolve this now. So with theme, when you want to like walk around like extending themes in Chakra, it's all called a system in that sense. So we convert this to createSystem.
Yeah.
And then you can, pretty much you can do like wrap this of the colors. I tend to just like I'm just gonna smush them all into like one object. Right?
Single object. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll do system equals create system. And I'm gonna pass the default config, which is just like the default setup for Chakra.
Okay.
Um, and then I'll just pass in like a new theme structure, right? So the new theme structure here for I think it's like tokens,
Tokens. Yeah.
and then I can bring in my colors. So all the colors here, I'll just move them over, cut that, and colors, and dump that there. Now, this one might come as a surprise because, like, why is it showing red? And that's because the token structure changed a little bit to match that of Panda CSS, and also to match the design token specification, right? So there's currently a proposed design token spec that we're working towards. We're trying to be like compliant with that, and the only thing is just that you have to wrap things in value. That's like
Okay.
I'll just
So
use
every
code.
token takes a key, a value key, right?
Yeah, so to specify the
Okay.
token, you have to sort of create an object, put value there, and
Okay.
that resolves that. All right, so once that is done, I can just I'm done with customizing colors. I'll do the same for fonts. In this case, I just need to define fonts. So I'll just take this from here, move it up there, just smoothing things out using help from cursor, wrap all of that in value. And then we can queue that one as well, remove this one. How was that? Colors. Yep. Okay, so colors and fonts is kind of done. And then here we've got space, which is some vgutter. Not sure why I created that, but let's just migrate that. So this is called spacing now. All right, so you can do vgutter and then put a value. And then we need to migrate the shadows. So we come in here with the shadows. That migrates the shadows part. Trying not to use AI as much so you guys can see. So you guys can see what's going on here. So we've migrated the shadows. And then here we've got like some interesting global styles, from style, global, and all this stuff going on here. That's about the last thing I need to migrate. So to define global CSS, I think let's collapse all of this so we see how it works. I think the key is out there. Yep. So global CSS is just a property right there in the system. And all you need to do is just to like take all those things from the global CSS and just paste them in there. Right. So the only error we have here is just like this a.anchor. Yeah, I think you can just like use the nest CSS nesting syntax. So you have to be very explicit on like the nesting. Yeah, so that's kind of like what the theme setup looks like. And all I have to do is kind of just export that system like so.
Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. So all you did was after installing and updating your packages, you came into your theme file, theme.js, is that just TS? And then you defined the custom theme using createSystem. So before it was extend theme, now you're
Yes,
using createSystem, and then you
exactly.
put all the tokens in, under the theme object, tokens object, and then you start defining your colors, your fonts, and everything. And one thing
Exactly.
to keep in mind is that all the tokens use a value key. So
Yes.
unlike before that, you could just lay out. Now you have to put the values in a value key. And
Yeah.
what else? You then define your
Um,
global vars in
global CSS.
global CSS. Yeah, global CSS. Okay, in the global CSS key. So that's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course, we can take a look at the changes here, and just
Mm-hmm.
like see, like, okay, we brought in create system, and then down there we just like restructured out. So
Yeah.
before you could just like put the theme like so. This is a brown palette and 50 to 900 like so, but now you have to sort of like do like value like that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like one key difference. And probably the first thing you want to do after
Yeah,
installing
that's the first
dependencies,
thing.
like probably want to set this up if you have a custom theme going on. You probably want to set this up. Right. So the next thing we want to do here is again we go back to the top level of our application. You see here there's some sort of like theme. Just gonna remove that now. I think you've got system now. And then here, ChakraProvider. So one of the things that the CLI sets up for us in the component UI is this provider thingy. What is this? So this provider is pretty much sets up the ChakraProvider and color mode, which is powered by Next Themes. Right. So this just helps you automatically set up like light dark mode if you want. My website doesn't really need light dark mode, but it's good to know that I can do that whenever I want. So what I'm going to do is just like switch this one to that provider component, and then pass in the I'll just wrap this in there for now. So we can remove this, remove that, switch over to my provider component and change the system. So by default, it sets up this like default system, which let me just show you what that is. If we open up the theme, the default system is just like imagine creating a system from just the default config. Like you're not extending anything, right? Like you're not creating anything custom.
Yeah.
So in that sense, when you see default system, it pretty much looks like default system is just like system create system from the default config. This is legit. This is all the code in there. But that saves you time. But now that we've got an extended version of that, we're not going to use the default system anymore. We're going to use like the new one. So I'll just close that and then we just queue this and then we just change this to system.
Okay. And that's it, right?
Yeah, so that's
That's
the
the
setup.
setup. Yeah, that's the setup. All right. Before we continue, hi Victory, Lucky. We have a question from Evita, and he says, Serge, could you explain why we now have to be explicit with the nested selectors? That's when you were defining the tokens. I know that you had to use the ampersand. So
That's global styles most likely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there was here where I made this
Mm-hmm.
change actually.
Yeah.
So before it was this, and now it's like it tries to yell at you, like what's going on here. Yeah, so that's a bit of history with TypeScript. I think the reason is pretty clear. It's just a TypeScript thing. We want to try to make sure that, deeply nested objects are also strongly typed. One of the clear thing is like if you do one of the things in V2, if you do this, for example, and I do like this color is red. Now, the first question you ask yourself is this P, does this P mean padding or does this P mean like the paragraph element? Now, this was a very tough question to resolve in V2. So we had to first like assume that it's like, I mean, if it's actually a style property, then I mean, we check the value to see if it's actually like a legit style property. And we try to make a good guess of whether this is a nested style or this is a P representing padding in that sense. I'm not sure if that's clear. But the idea is kind of like, instead of just typing P here, which could potentially clash with the style prop, you have to be very explicit to say and P. Now it's very clear that, okay, you're referring to the fact that you're trying to style a paragraph element, not like padding in that sense. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean. So like just being explicit.
Yeah, being explicit about like, are you trying to style an element or a
And
nested
so
element, or are you trying to use a style property? We need to make that clear distinction for the type safety to work efficiently.
I see. I see. Alrighty.
Yeah,
So
so yeah, that's the key difference. Any more questions?
someone says I have a question about the popover component. Yes, so please ask your question, Adebayo Steve. Ask a question about the popover component. But in the meantime, let's continue migration.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so we've done the provider. I think all of this other stuff can still stay, even though I kind of feel like, I mean, they could be migrated over as well, but I'll just leave that for now. And then I'll just try to like walk through like, I mean, the different components that I have here. So I start with the homepage, and then just start to see all the reds and try to fix all the reds. Right. So another thing that is part of the before I go too far, another thing that's part of the migration process for Next.js is to kind of like set up this optimize the bundle size, right? So you could just like take that one and just add that over to the Next.js config. Right, I think this is a deprecated option, doesn't exist. So you could just do that optimize package imports, and that makes it work just fine.
What happens if we don't do this step?
So this step is used for bundle optimization when you build your site. It kind of makes sure that like, I mean, Next.js only includes components that you imported from Chakra, and not like just every component is there.
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit of a nudge. I think, I mean, over time, this will definitely be Next.js by default, but right now you just need this manual assist there. So yeah, so we've done that. We're back in the app. We looked at our index. A couple of things has changed. There's wrap and wrap item. So we probably need to migrate those. So let's just start with those two. We get rid of them. And then here, the first thing I see is H stack with spacing.
Yeah.
Spacing was a custom thing I made up. Spacing was a custom thing I made up in V2 just because it makes sense from a design perspective. Like, hey, you've got this and you want to apply spacing between them. But the CSS syntax for that is gap, right? So we want to at least not stray too far from the platform in that sense.
Okay. So all updates should be made on the spacing prop to gap for like H stack or any component.
Yeah, from H stack, V stack, stack.
Yeah.
I think even grid as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And then if we go all the way down here, again, we see simple grid with a spacing. Just change that to gap. And then here, another spacing, change that to gap. And down here, so this is largely just a spacing. This is largely like a spacing thingy. And then here we have wrap. So this component is no longer like does not exist anymore. I think that is currently documented somewhere.
I think you make H stack. Use the H stack and set the wrap.
Yeah, removed components. So here wrap, right? So just like, I mean, you can replace a wrap with an H stack, right? So let's just do that. So I mean, a wrap is just an H tag, and then you put like some. Um, I mean, that's legit all the
What's the
migration,
wrap?
and
Okay.
then spacing goes to gap. Now for this one, I mean, you can replace this with just a flex, or whatever you prefer. I mean, it's not, it doesn't really need to be its own component. So these are kind of like the little decisions we made. Like if it's just a flex underneath and maybe it's doing something simple, then you should just use a flex there. So yeah, I mean, homepage looks good so
Good.
far. I mean, whether it works is, I mean, it's yet to be seen.
Yeah, we'll have to go through all the pages. So let's take a pause here and answer a few questions.
Okay.
So Steve says, how do I change the pop over trigger to hover and not click? So that's a bit more hands-on.
Yeah, that's a bit more hands-on. I'm not sure what you're building for, to be honest. But there's a very good chance that like this might be trying to build a navigation menu, or something that like I mean that has some links inside where you hover and then you can click on it. I think that's a slightly different pattern. But you can definitely control the popover, right? Like, I think there's like I mean, probably not like super related to the stream, but like here is like a controlled example. And here you have some sort of React state, right? You have a React state.
You can zoom in just one.
Okay, let's go one more.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So here you've got a React state you can use. So like technically, if you've got a trigger, well, I have to say we don't have like a default way to do that, but by default, and that's because we are working on a navigation menu pattern, which would most likely open things based on hover. So we're trying to create that clear-cut boundaries between different patterns, so you don't mix and match things incorrectly. So here you could definitely add like some sort of pointer, I mean, some pointer enter or pointer move on the trigger and open the popover from that. Right, I'm happy to show you demo. I mean, close to the end if you have some time, but you can use the controlled example and sort of control how you'd like it to work.
Okay. Andrew says, if I don't use the default theme, will I essentially have app components with the new style engine ready to be started from scratch with my own theme?
Yes, exactly. If you don't use the default system, yes, that's what you have essentially.
Awesome, awesome. So now we have migrated the home page, right? So let's go
Yeah,
to the next page. Yeah.
yeah. There's a little trick here, which is kind of like for the icon. I noticed the icon component from Chakra.
Yeah, sure.
The thing with icon, I just prefer to put the icon in as a child, and you can just like pass the style. And that's because the icon just clones the child and puts all the accessibility properties on it.
Okay, so is this like a new pattern when using icons in V3?
Yes, it's an important.
Okay, okay, so all right.
All right, so the home page index is good. Let's go to talks, for example. All right, so talks, we've got the wrap thing here again. So we try to migrate this wrap, change that to an H stack, and say wrap equals to wrap, change spacing to gap. All right.
That's all.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, awesome.
And then we go here to snippets. Well, this is not like Chakra snippets. It's just a page on my site called snippets.
Okay. I was gonna
And
ask like
then
snippets.
yeah, just a page on my site called snippets. I think it's
All
just
right.
I'm not sure why I had it, but I had some ideas, I think. But here, so we've got box, and here we see this SX prop in Chakra. So this is no longer like a thing in Chakra. We can just replace that with the CSS prop. Yeah, it's just CSS is what we prefer. And again, I mean, I'm just a fan of like doing things like that, which is just be explicit with be explicit with sort of the nesting there.
Okay.
I mean, technically you can move them all over there. It doesn't have to be like inside of the CSS
Inside
object.
CSS. Yeah.
Yep. And then you can keep just this one there, which is what you use for styling. Yeah, so this page is good. We go to the index. We've got an error here. some simple grid. There we go, gap. So far we can see that like it's just like I mean taking note of a few things.
Yeah, I think the most daunting was the setup. Once you can, scale through the setup and ensure that you're using the right package and if you're using a custom theme, it's properly set up. I think once you go, file by file into the individual files, you can just switch the style props and switch any other components to match V3.
Yep, exactly. So here, if we maybe move on, we've got to the blog page. I mean, again, we've got like spacing, change spacing to gap, change this to the CSS prop. I'm just going to keep everything else. I'll try to be a bit more explicit here. There, and to the blog index page, change spacing to gap. And yeah, that's it. And then one of the things I have to mention for folks that are familiar with Panda CSS is the fact that like we try to unify these two projects as much as possible. So if you use Chakra and you use Panda, you should feel pretty much no difference between them because they work and they feel the same way. All right. So yeah, so I think we kind of gone through like all the pages. Looks maybe
You gone
for
through the 4 yeah.
yeah, for looks okay. So an
Okay.
unused component there. So yeah, those are the pages. And then of
What
course, if
about
you go
what
ahead,
about importing from like the snippets folder?
yeah, you can see
There
my site is
any?
a pretty simple site. I
You're
don't.
just using layout components,
I
right?
just use only like layout components.
Okay.
So that's why I say that snippets are nice to have. You don't really have to use them. But even if it's just a provider, I'm fine with that. I mean, I can remove the rest, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I've got a bunch of components here to quickly review.
Okay.
So I'll click through the components just to be sure like everything is good. Um, Card, block card. Um, this one is a gap. This one goes to gap as well. This one gets interesting. So this is the first time where we see an example that like in V2 we use the as prop. And then in V2 we somehow like auto infer the properties of the time element. Of course, not many people know that there's actually a time element. Like, so you can use this time element to represent time related data. So one of the properties of this time element is date time. So you use this to actually pass the machine like the actual like ISO date. So even if you say like August 12th, I mean you can put the actual date there.
Interesting.
That's kind of like how this time element works, right? So we try to auto infer this property in V2, but
V2.
V3 we don't because the TypeScript complexity. I mean, you can just
It's
run the holiday.
exponential.
Yeah, so what we did is kind of like you can use this new property called like as child. So that means you can just wrap that, move this over to the element itself, and then just say, I mean, I want a box, but I want it to be like a time
Like the time.
element,
Okay.
right? So now you can pass all the style properties. If you want to color it, you can color it from there. So this is kind of like the styling place. This is the rendering place. So just create that boundary between them.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's
it's very
easier to work
important to
on.
call it out here because I know, the ass pop was very common. It was like a very common pattern in
Yeah.
V2, just use box as this, but now in V3, like we no longer use the as prop. We just like use the as child and then put that element that you want it to act as within it as a child.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So I'll click through the rest. We got the chakra logo, which is fine. We got a container, which works fine. Description item, emoji, empty state, block card. We've got a red here. So we do the same thing here, and we repeat the same pattern here as well, which is create a time element, move that in, and set the date time. Remove this and do as child instead. So that solves this. And then we go here to H stack. We've seen spacing, change that to gap. And we keep going. This one is currently untyped, so let's give it some type. Yeah, here we got a soup of reds.
Lots of wraps.
Yeah, let's remove the wraps. So here we see a bunch of things. Hashtag, which is using the wrap props. So let's change this first to an H stack from Chakra UI. And then let's just change this to a flex for now. And then you pass the tag prop. So now we fix the typings, right? So here we change that to gap. And so here we see there are some typings that needs to be used. I mean, you could get, because this is now called gap. I mean, you can imagine that like when you hover on that, it's quite gibberish, but the idea is like you can grab the props from the stack component and pick the gap.
Okay.
That's what maps that. Technically, I would like to change that as well to gap, but I'll just do it one step at a time. And then the tag props, because that goes onto the flex. I changed that to flex props. So that way I've somewhat like migrated this one over. And then here we see some interesting type called system props in link item. And again, here we see hstack as A with an href. So here's where we need to migrate this as prop thing again.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do this one first. So we start with the easy one, which is change spacing to gap. And then here, as I explained earlier, we cannot, I mean, Chakra doesn't auto infer things anymore. So you have to use like render the anchor tag and pass all those properties directly to that anchor tag. And all you just have to say is like, give me a tag, but render is as a link, which is that one.
Awesome.
And then here with system props, I think it's just called system style object instead.
Oh, it's just a rename from system props to system style object. Okay.
Exactly. And that works just fine.
Okay, so there's a question here before we continue.
Okay.
Andrew says, let me just show it. We use a lot of components from V2 that will now be snippets in V3. How similar are the component prop interfaces? I'm trying to judge how much work is involved to update all the component instances. How much work?
Yeah, not much, to be honest. That was the point of the snippets in the first place. So if I take a component like checkbox, right, that's my favorite one to always look at. Oh, let's do a different one. Let's do avatar.
Avatar, okay.
Right. So this is avatar in V3. And then let's switch over to the V2 site. I'm just gonna zoom in.
Yep.
And then head over to components. We look for avatar. Yeah, I'm so bad at finding things here. Okay, here you go. Avatar. So here you see we've got like you just import avatar and avatar badge, avatar group from Chakra UI React. The way you use that is you just render that. You just render the avatar component. So theoretically, if I just like paste that in, that's how I use the avatar in V2. All right. So let's switch over to V3 and see how that helps. So in V3, just look at this code here. It looks pretty much the same, right? But the only difference, of course, is remember again, Chakra UI is open by default. All right, so the main purpose of the snippets is to help you kind of like close out and get back to like how it used to be in V2, in that sense. So you pass a name, you pass a source, and everything is there, pretty much configured for you. So that's kind of like the usefulness of snippets. Yeah, I don't want to go too far because of time. Yeah, that's it.
Right. So let's go on. I think we're almost done running through the different components, right?
Yeah, we just have a few more to go. Yep. So here we've got MDX components, just one squiggly line, which is changed that to gap. Here you can see the as prop is stuck as figure. I'm not using anything. I'm not passing props from figure. I mean, so you can legit still use the as prop, but I mean, Chakra will not infer properties of that. If you really need to infer, then use the as child, like we explained earlier.
Yeah.
So here, block icon, navbar. Okay,
This is
this is
another interesting
another
one.
interesting one.
Yeah.
Actually, a bunch of reds here. Yeah, so this is a good one. So here we see that like we've got like drawer content, drawer overlay, stack divider. Let's see how we can migrate this over. So the drawer component, uh, I mean, yeah, we've got a snippet for drawer here. So I'm just gonna use that snippet instead. I'm just gonna kill all of this one for now. Try to look for where the drawer is used. So here we've got the drawer component. Okay. So what I'm gonna do the instead is to kind of like pull the drawer component from the snippet.
Mhm.
I think you see here there's UI/drawer. Right. So what we
Yeah.
do is just grab the drawer root from my snippets. Then here overlay is now backdrop. All right. So I grab the drawer backdrop. And then here we've got the drawer content. So I import the drawer content. From there, yeah, and then we'll try to fix the rest of it. So drawer content throws an error here. Let's see
Yeah.
what.
Do we need a draw trigger? Oh,
Not necessarily.
okay.
Not necessarily. Yeah, probably don't think we need this ID. We'll come back to that shortly. And then yeah, we fix that. Now the next thing we want to do here is we've got this use disclosure. I think we still have that from Chakra. So what we can do here is just to fix that. Where are we? So this should now be just open, not just open. And then here is just like, I mean, technically speaking, this acts like the trigger, to be honest.
Okay.
So, because you can see it's got like center, it's got type, it's got on
Yeah.
click.
Do we just remove it and replace it with the trigger instead?
Yeah, we could just simplify this significantly.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of that one. And then just bring in the drawer trigger. And then I just put all of this as a trigger. And that way we can get rid of this one and that one. We can remove type button and on click since that's going to be undo automatically for us. Array expanded and all these shenanigans already exist in the drawer. The area controls already exist, ID already exists. So yeah, we're just back to a few things. Rendering the center stuff as a button. Yeah, and then here we need to kind of like figure out what to do. We need to render different icons. How do we render different icons? Let's see. So we probably would need access to the drawer context, which gives us access to, let's just call it drawer. And I'll take this and I do that instead. So let's do this. So we're not getting any typings from here. I think it throws an error. What's the error here? Did we upgrade the typings for React?
Let's check
So for
package.json.
this one, we go to package.json and we just check that let's bump up all these things. So I'll do an upgrade for the React types.
Okay.
That's probably 19. Oh boy, I'm not sure I want to get into 19. So let's do the TypeScript one first. Use the latest version of TypeScript. Yeah, I think that's probably a good start. You see if that helps. I'm not sure what the latest 18 version is. I probably would like to upgrade to that instead.
Same.
Yeah, but let's go. It's just types, I guess. Let's see if that works. So with that in place, I think there's also a thing with TS config, right? And Chakra UI v3.
Yeah. Did you
If you go to
upgrade
the
for
get
Next.js?
Next.js, definitely some things to check out here. So I just copy this out
Path?
first
Yeah.
and see what the difference is. Module resolution, paste that, remove that one, keep it like so. I've
I
got
think it's
some
just the
parts
path.
already, so I
Yeah.
just move that down
Yeah.
and remove that one. So that kind of sets things up for me. So so I just have that components. All right. So now that I've done that, I'm just gonna restart my TypeScript server. Come on. All right. So that loads correctly. We've got the drawer, and then we go drawer.open. So when the drawer is open, we kind of like just render two different icons. Ideally, this would be good to make this like a dedicated, like an easier component. Just looking at that. But yeah, that's about it. And then here, stock, we've got a divider here. So the divider is changed to separator.
Okay.
Spacing is gap. And then stock divider, as you'd expect, would be stock separator.
Separator.
There you go. And then spacing goes to gap again. And here we've got this as prop thing going on where it's an H stock rendering as a link, an Next.js link, passing href to it. So what we do is to bring the link directly here, like so, pass the href to it, and change all this to as child instead. Change that to gap. Here, this one, active link. I think maybe this should be in the docs, but it's currently called current page.
So active link is now current page.
Yeah, just take note of this one. I think maybe we
Okay.
probably want to add that.
Miss it out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just remembered.
That's yeah. Then for the icon, I guess that you want to change it to how it's used now in Chakra v3.
Yeah, that's a good one. We can do data.icon. I'm not sure how the icon type is defined. It's defined as an element type, so we just render that as an icon. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yep, that's it there. We can remove the stock divider now. So we're almost done. I think MDX component complaints. Here, chakra.feed caption. So we need to check this one. Chakra is exported. So we'll come back to this one. For this is we've got spacing goes to gap. Spacing goes to gap. Yeah, SX prop again. I mentioned this earlier. Just change that to CSS. Just add the specific like the nesting syntax there. And then we go to the search input. Yeah, this one calls this use merge refs. I mean, we don't expose that. I don't know if it's still available. I have to check that one. So the Chakra UI React hooks. I think the hooks are exposed. It's just that use merge refs does not exist there. So
What do we use
I mean, luckily you can always kind of solve that. So let's create a merge refs function. I think merge refs is exported. I'm not sure what I use merge refs. It's not. And then here, default value. Default value, we have to check this one. It's a type mismatch. So this one feels very interesting. So what I'd rather do here instead of making this type of like prop soup on the component is to create like, this is called the search input. All right, let's call this the search. It's gonna be a weird name. Let's call it search input. So let's call that input, and I'll just make this into a recipe instead.
Okay.
Right? So I'll copy all of this out from here, and just use cursor to add those things because I don't want to write that by hand. Um, so we've got that. So that's the input, and then I can just take that one and just replace it with this and get rid of this whole thing here, so I can at least see just the functionality. Okay. Um, I mean, I'll probably apply similar things to this button as well. Looks like quite a lot of things going on.
Yeah. What component is this? Okay, this is the search input. Okay.
This search input looks like quite a lot. So I'll just call this the search input button. Probably figure that out already for me. So yeah, I'm just using cursor to make this faster. So it's called display flex, rounded large, LMD, and then I'll do color white. So with that in place, and then maybe this hover one actually. So
Okay.
underscore hover changes. So I'll just replace all that with this guy, remove all the style props from there. Sorry. Yep. Not ref, at least. Let's keep the ref. And then remove the hover. Remove the color as well. Okay. So that solves that. We go to the SEO. SEO is just SEO. Snippets, snippet card, social icons are good.
I'm
Then
from a
here
lot.
we see the alert component. We see the dark mode component. Yeah, let's see how we can migrate these ones. So here, again, anytime I see a mixture like a soup like this, I'm kind of like inclined to make that into a component. Right, I'm probably super lazy when I do this one.
That's what happens when you write code. You come back to it and see you have to refactor lots of things.
Yeah, so with the alert component, I mean, it's just the text in there, and then you've got a status and a variant. So what I can do is just use the. I don't think we've got like alert as a snippet. We don't have alert as a snippet.
We
So what
do.
I'll do
Oh, I
is,
think okay. Right now in your project, you don't, right?
yeah. I mean, I could. I mean, let me do this one without snippets so that people can actually
Okay.
see how it looks like. So I just grab the alert component from Chakra and just put the alert root. All right. And then maybe do like the alert content. Right. So that's, I mean, Chakra is open by default again. So I mean, it's kind of important to know that. And that means that like you have to use the parts of the component. Right. So left accent is not a thing anymore. I think it's just subtle.
Yeah, you have solid, subtle, surface. Those are the three variants right now.
Yeah, exactly. And then here we've got like dark mode wrapping everything. Probably do the same here as well. And let cursor refactor that one. Yeah, so
Mm.
this dark mode component, how do we refactor this? I think this one should be pretty easy. All that is required of it is just like you don't need a dark mode component again. All you have to do is just add a dark class to a parent, right? So I mean that alone makes it work.
Oh, really? So let's talk a bit about this because it's very useful.
Yeah, so I mean prior to now we do some React context magic.
Mm.
To take the context, if you said light mode, dark mode, and then we change all of the styles based on that. I mentioned earlier, we're trying to reduce the runtime
Mm.
evaluation as much as possible. And the goal is to get this to zero if possible, right? So anything that has to do with like computing things in a funny way, we try to get rid of that.
Okay.
So here we just have a CSS selector inside of the alert that says that anytime the parent has a dark class, style it this way.
Oh, awesome.
Right,
Awesome.
so that's sort of like how it works. You don't even have to add it here. You can go all the way to the top and add it, I mean, to the HTML element as well. But this is just a quick migration path, since I don't want to change too many things, right? So we've got that in there, and this already smells like a soup. I think there's an issue here with the prop inference when you use this chakra dot syntax. So that's definitely something to keep note of. We should fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the meantime, what I'll do is create like, I mean, a feedback input and just like try to, I just take everything here and just tell Cursor to add styles from that. Okay, that's horrible. Let's reject that.
I get when you use AI.
Yeah, that's what you get when you use AI sometimes. A bit too much. So I'm just gonna isolate out this one. I think when I type flex one, and then we do like
Yeah.
everything like so, no need for placeholder, thanks. And then we grab the rounded, and then that we just get rid of placeholder and not the rounded as well. And there you go. So that's pretty much all the styling props. So I just like change that to the feedback input and get rid of all the styling props from here. And get rid of styling props from here as well. Okay.
Yep.
And then this also feels like a huge soup of styles. I just create again, I'm becoming more a fan of like just creating smaller components instead of just having this big prop soup.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it feels quite a lot and even hard, like super hard to read. So I'm just gonna use this. Yeah, everything looks good. And then I replace this with the feedback input, remove all the styling things. And it's a lot easier to read now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Format to go. This one is just fine.
That looks good.
Um,
I think we've been here.
and then there.
Get input props.
Yeah, it's like a custom checkbox. I'm not
Mm.
sure why I needed a custom checkbox.
As a developer.
But yeah, let's see how we can resolve this one. We've got like, I mean, probably something we should can add a note for this. We should definitely export these props.
You
We
use
should just,
checkbox props. Okay.
yes. But yeah, I mean, let's see how we can resolve this. So we've got here on change sub custom hook going on. So what we need to do here is like just first call this checkbox. So it's a lot easier to read. And then here should be on value change or on checked change, I think here. And then this is checked. So what I need to do is pretty much transmit that over to on change, right? So based on whatever props is passed in, I'll grab the checked state from there and forward that to the checkbox. Okay, so this prop isn't exported. It should be an easy one, but you can definitely just like write function that does that. All right, so I'll just force this to cast that to a boolean. And then now I just have to fix all this, right? I mean, I'll just do checkbox dot get with props.
Okay.
I think it's got get control props now. And then this is get label props.
These are all exported from Chakra.
I'm reading all of that from this hook.
Okay, fine. The
Checkbox
hook.
here.
Okay.
Exactly. So this is hidden. This is like input props, but it's kind of like, I think it's hidden input props. So it's clear that it's hidden.
Okay.
Again, I mean, most likely people have this kind of setup for custom checkboxes. So this is
Yeah.
kind of like a good way to like make that work. Okay. So we've got like, so here, we see that immediately I do that, we have an error here, and that's because checked is what's coming from there now, and that makes it work. And then the talk card, again, we see a dark mode
Did for the dark
component.
mode, yeah.
Easy thing to do is let's look for where the dark mode is used. There. Probably don't need to wrap that. Can just like make a class name at any level and put dark on it. Casing is just like, text transform. Then here again, don't need dark mode since we have the dark class up there now.
Specified, yeah.
And then color scheme is a good one.
Yeah, it's now color palette in V3.
Exactly. You probably want to look out for color scheme because it doesn't show any warning.
Doesn't throw an error, right?
Yeah, it doesn't throw an error. So that's one you have to kind of just check through. Thankfully it's just that place. So you want to check that.
Color scheme goes to color palette. Yep.
Exactly.
And then for the is external pop, I think that goes to just external, right? Link overlay.
Link overlay is an anchor element, so I think you just do like target blank or something.
Blank, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that resolves it. We've got two more. We do gap here, and then this goes to CSS.
CSS.
Yeah, I feel I've seen this guy many times. It's probably what refactoring. And then here, here we've got like use token. And use token takes a bunch of things and passes it there. I think we just have a type mismatch. This returns a string array. Probably a migration thing as well. This expects just a string. Right? So what you want to do is just destructure that out. So use token allows you to pass in an arbitrary number of tokens. So you can pass in, you can do like, I'm trying to resolve orange.500 as well. And then you can pick out orange. You can pick it out from there. So that's gonna do all that. But honestly, when I think about it, it's like, why do I have to do that? Because I'm passing that to a raw SVG. So that's probably okay. Okay.
Right. So I think we're done with all the files, right?
Yeah, we're done with all the files. I still see an error here. I think this has to do with the type inference thingy for chakra dot, not syntax. So I should definitely.
Do you want to make it just a text?
I'll push a fix for this one. But the way to fix this for now is we do box as fix caption. That should fix it temporarily. And let AI help me with this one and this one. Do box as code. Yeah, that resolves it.
Yep, no reds. Cool.
No more.
So let's check out. I've been itching to check out and see what we have on our UI.
I'm so sure something's broken.
Yeah, this is the time where you know whether what you've done is good or not. But let's see. If anything's broken, it's very likely it has to do with the icons, because from my experience, I know those things always hide somewhere. Let's see.
Yeah, the icons are an interesting one. Yeah, this is definitely a very familiar error, which is kind of like has to do with this some things with SWC, which reminds me of the version of Next.js. So I have to check what the root cause of this one is. I think it's something about the version of Next.js. So Next.js here is tier 13.
Do you want to upgrade?
So I thought I actually did at the very beginning. So that's like 15 now. Yeah, I'm just gonna check all these other guys because it doesn't seem like
No, I think those ones are fine. Let's see.
Yeah, let's go again.
Okay.
I mean, if we see any warnings,
Yay.
um, so all the things are generated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Do, do, do.
I
Let's
expect them to
see.
look broken, to be honest. But let's see.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
first
the
one.
children. Okay.
That looks like the icon one.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the icon just kind of hides. You will not really catch it till you start checking your files one by one and then use it.
Yeah, so
If
I
you
just look
just
for the icon.
search,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's the first
exactly.
one. So I'll just drop in my icon here is an element type. So let's just do this for now. So icon is when you see that kind of error, it's just like definitely something worth checking out. So here, I mean, it's passed in as an element type. Probably don't want to do an element type to be honest.
Yeah.
But like,
You want to change the type?
just draw this icon. No,
Okay.
let's just do that for now. Icon element. So that's fixed. Here works just fine. We can do icon element is data icon. And then down there, we have an interesting error here with property children does not exist. This is a type thingy, but I'll come back to this. And then here, also another one,
Yep.
close icon, and then we'll remove that one. And there we go. There's this, and then this one, this icon. It's really hard to figure out what the type is. Let's track the achievement item. There you go. It's an element type.
Okay.
So I'll just alias this back to icon L, and then do like icon L, like so. So let's see what the next error is.
This is literally the step to take anytime you're migrating. Yeah, I don't think you can run away from these errors.
Yeah, you can see that at least in the background, it kind of
It
renders.
starts to show and then it just throws an error.
Yeah, so most likely you see here we've got like I mean
What file
stack
is
frames
this?
are not the best, but if you walk all the way, you can see that it's in the nav menu and it's in the dialog route. I think that reminds me of the drawer component.
A draw component here that had an error, right?
Yeah, so we have two buttons in there. The trigger itself
Mm.
is a button, and this guy is rendered as button. Alright, so
Mm.
what we should do is just pass in as child to that dialog trigger, um, like so. I think this error has been very common. I'll try and track that one down. So what we'll do is check C, and there you go.
Mm. Yay. Awesome.
So we got
Still looks pretty much similar.
yeah, it
Yeah.
looks pretty much similar. This is before and this is after.
Where's before, where's after? Because it's
Like, there's no legit no difference.
it's literally no different. Because I'm like, where's before, where's after? It looks really good, right? Like I would have thought
Yeah,
that there would be a lot more shifts and changes in design, but I think it still looks pretty much the same.
yeah, everything looks pretty much the same. I sense a little change maybe in this hover here.
Okay, let's see the
When I
before.
hover, before when I hover on this, I see this noise effect.
Okay, yeah,
Um, so that's definitely something to check. But the fact that it all renders and
and
looks
looks
pretty
good.
much the same is a good step. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, then I can go
Awesome.
from here and like finish up, figure
Yeah,
out anything else. So yeah,
yeah.
I mean, migration definitely we've done our best to crunch this down in 14 minutes or
Mm-hmm.
so. But yeah, migration is definitely something you want to at least invest some time into and fix all the little quirks. Try to use the snippets if they're available. Yeah, from there on, you can. I think it should be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it if you have the time. Like, just take it one step at a time and just check through all the files. I think the baseline is to just have your setup properly done Once your
Yeah.
setup is properly done, you have the packages, you have your provider properly set up, you know, you just need to go through the files one by one. Depending on how big your project it is, it might take a lot of time, but if you can invest that time, it will be definitely worth it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thanks, Sage.
Okay.
It was interesting to see you do it in how many minutes? An
It
hour?
was maybe roughly an hour, 50 minutes roughly. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So we have a
Yeah.
question from John Cotter. It says V3 looks fantastic. We are currently using Chakra as the base for our design system. Separate internal library. Any recommendations for migration? We are debating migrating to V3 versus going Arc UI plus Panda. It is very interesting when I hear questions like this. And for you, I'm curious to hear your answer because you know you're the one that created Chakra and you're the one that also created Arc plus Panda. So yeah, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just different investment of time. That's all I see when I think about this, right? I mean, generally speaking, we've tried our best to sort of like, I mean, match up Arc plus Panda and Chakra. They're pretty much like
Mhm.
Chakra V3 at least. They're pretty much kind of aligned in that sense. I mean, I would say that like it might be a little bit of like a jump going from Chakra to Arc plus Panda. And the reason being that like, I mean, Panda is a fairly static system. Right. So if you've got some if conditions and some interesting like way you write styles or generate styles in your code base that's dynamic, I definitely recommend like sticking to like Chakra and just upgrade instead. But if you've got like fairly static, I mean our design system is not too complex, nothing dynamic is happening, then you can definitely explore Arc plus Panda. The setup time, of course, you'd have that like learning slight learning curve before you start to become as productive as Chakra. So, but if you're definitely willing to and you have the time and resources, I mean, I think it's totally fine. Right. So at this point, Chakra UI is Arc plus emotion. Right. So it's just the only thing that's changing is sort of like the emotion part swaps to Panda. Um, and you don't have to do too much to learn emotion, but you might have to because Panda is a static system. There's always a little bit of like, I used to be able to do this easily with Chakra, but now it's like I need to be careful to know like the limitations of a static system. So any system that is static has some rules or constraints. So
Yeah.
you just have to learn those constraints, and it's not too many with Panda. Trust me, it's just to just get used to it. Right. So I mean, if you wanted to debate, it's always ultimately a matter of how much time do we have, how much resources do we have. Do we have the time to learn Panda? If you already know Panda, then of course, I mean, definitely try out Arc with Panda. But I always just think that like it's easier going from Chakra V2 to V3
V3
first.
as opposed to going straight from Chakra V2 to Arc plus Panda.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew says, where does Pack UI fit into the whole ecosystem? You know, Pack UI.
Yeah, Park UI is currently, I mean, also evolving. But I would say like Park UI was meant to help like the Panda plus Arc story, just like the previous question. All right, so if you've got like if you want to use Arc UI and Panda, the idea was sort of like Park UI would give you the same ultimate experience, like as if you're using Chakra UI, but you're not. Right, that's kind of like the idea behind Park UI. Right, so right now, Pacquiao is being updated to match up with Chakra. Probably be done in a month or two, something like this. And then you'll be able to sort of like have like pretty much the same experience. Like just swap the imports and everything works the same way. Um, that's the ultimate experience we're looking for. So you don't have to go through all your learning phase and learning curve with all these things.
So that way it will probably be easier to switch from Chakra V2 to Pack UI when Pack UI is at that level, you know, where it's updated fully, right?
Yeah, exactly. At that point, it doesn't even matter
Okay.
how you go about it. If you already like Chakra V2 to Chakra V3 and you be like, I want to go back to RQI and Panda, you just swap it to ParkUI and pretty much the same experience.
Yeah,
Right?
I think that'll be the really sweet spot when everything just, you know, is cohesive.
Yeah.
Either tech stack you use, it just looks the same. So before we wrap up, Sage, I want us to talk a bit about some of the naming conventions that have been, you know, changed in V3. I know that prior we had like the modal component, and now it's now called a different component. I saw a
Okay.
comment the other day where someone was like, oh, you removed the model component, and I think we had to explain that okay, the model component hasn't been removed, it's just been renamed. So what are some of the things that developers have to take note of really pertaining to naming patterns and conventions in V3 when migrating?
Yeah, the answer is very simple. I'll say just read the docs. I mean, that's like the first thing. Like, I mean, so
Okay.
you don't want to be so afraid that, oh my God, something changed, something has been removed. Like, just check. V3 has, I mean, way more component sets than V2. All right, so if you check it, you probably see what you're looking for. There was maybe removed that doesn't exist anymore, things like that. But I mean, as far as I remember, there's really, besides the hooks, I think we removed some hooks. But as far as components are concerned, we added more. I mean, we probably removed just a few that were not like really needed, like wrap and wrap item. That's a classic example. But for the most part, we pretty much try to keep the same naming. And for modal versus dialogue, it's just like we got a lot more technical with how we name things and a lot more consistent, right? So a modal, as much as it's a good name, it's actually just a dialogue. Even the HTML element is also called dialogue, right? So a modal is just like a dialogue in a specific state. So we don't want to call that component modal. It's actually just a dialogue, right? So we want to just simplify our naming so to avoid confusion in that sense. So it's similar to spacing versus gap
Mm-hmm.
modal versus dialogue. Like spacing is a good name, but again, the CSS stuff is called like CSS name is gap. Modal is a good name, but the actual HTML element name is called a dialogue. So we just go back there instead.
Yeah. Just like Sage mentioned, I'll encourage, go through the migration guide that we have. It's definitely still a work in progress or a living document, meaning that there may be some things that we missed out to document. And if you ever faced any, you encounter any issues when you're migrating, feel free to also contribute to the documentation and, add it in so that it can help others as well. So yeah, that's about it for me for this live stream. Sage, do you have any final comments or things to say?
I know. I mean, I would say that, like, I mean, first of all, thank you all for joining. I think we still have 7 people here.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you,
joining. Thanks for
everyone.
working through all of this. If you've got questions or you have, like, maybe you experience an issue with migration, I mean, just create a discussion on GitHub. I try my best to at least go through discussions. I mean, most of the time, every day. But usually we go through, like, we always go through discussions and issues. So feel free to start a discussion. We can easily fix any issues you find. All right. So hopefully it will be a smooth migration experience for you as well.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. I'm very excited for the holidays already. Like, I'm just really happy for Christmas and I'm counting down. So, have a really fantastic holiday, everyone. And this is our last live stream. So, we'll see you again in 2025. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Bye everyone. Thanks for joining.